Hey everybody, we are back now with chapter 20 in our ongoing exploration through the story. This week's chapter is called The Queen of Beauty and Courage. The entirety of this particular chapter is wrapped up or is included or is covered, whatever you want to say, within the Old Testament book of Esther, and with the exception of just a handful of verses right at the tail end of Esther within the Bible, that are just kind of talking about a couple of like historical places where these events are recorded. The chapter includes everything else. So almost the entirety, the vast majority of the entirety of the book of Esther is included within chapter 20. The setting of what we are talking about is the reign of Xerxes, also known as Artaxerxes in some different translations. Everything that I've ever found says that these are the same person. It's possible that they were different people, but Xerxes is the guy that we hear about. He was king of the Persians. Historical documents place him as king between the years of 486 to 465 BC, so about 21 years that he reigned. And the story of Esther covers maybe about a third-ish of that, maybe upwards of like 9 years of that history, but kind of we touch base in and out of some different spots. So some of the high points where things seem to happen. Queen Vashti is deposed in the third year of Xerxes' reign. Esther is presented in year 7 of his reign, following a year of her beauty treatments and an unknown period of time that she was in the harem. Then Haman's conspiracy against Mordecai and the Jews happens in year 12. So that's kind of the real high point timeline of what we're looking at. Now, Esther and Mordecai are cousins. He's older. Seemingly, he has adopted and raised her, but they are described as cousins. They're in the 4th generation after the initial Babylonian exile. We kind of hear about that as we hear the lineage of Mordecai following the exile, so they're the 4th generation. Their story of both of them kind of have some echoes. You know, that's something we've talked about quite a bit before, is echoes of things that we hear before. We sort of hear some echoes of Joseph. We kind of hear some echoes of Daniel. Esther is recognized for her courage. She faced death to approach Xerxes in order to stand up for her culture, essentially. Mordecai, also courage and not bowing down before others, specifically Mordecai, which kind of actually sort of sounds like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But again, we're hearing echoes and reminder, we talked about this in the last video, that a lot of these various chapters that we've had are all kind of taking place around the same general time period of the Babylonian exile. So they sort of overlap some of the various events that are going on, and some of the themes are similar as well. These various events that happen within the story of Esther lead to the establishment of the Jewish festival, or the Jewish celebration of Purim. Purim is a 2-day celebration, still celebrated today. And like many Jewish celebrations, at least by my understanding, they serve as a remembrance of an event that was either miraculous or somehow when their culture was delivered from danger. Some of these similar things. Passover is a big one. Passover is the reminder of the 10th plague, the death of the firstborn, that resulted in the people being able to leave Egypt. The the festival of booths, sometimes called the festival of tabernacles, same thing. That is a reminder of the 40 years that the culture spent wandering in the wilderness. So these various festivals are ways that the people remember these things that have happened, and Purim is similar in that it's the reminder of these events that happen in Esther. Interesting point that is worth pointing out, even though God's favor upon Esther and Mordecai and the Jewish people is implied, God is never mentioned in the book of Esther, which I think is kind of funny. But that's just a little thing that I wanted to elaborate on. Some high points of the narrative. And again, I'm going to let you guys talk about it. You don't necessarily need me to tell you everything that happens or to elaborate on everything, but here are the high points of what goes on. So we have Queen Vashti is deposed. Esther gets pulled into the harem, eventually becomes a concubine, and then becomes the queen. Mordecai, her cousin, discovers the assassination plot and thwarts it, which earns him favor eventually. Mordecai and Haman begin to butt heads, and Haman increases in stature, seemingly raising all the way up to like second in command, seemingly. Haman then, oh no, I already talked about that. Mordecai advises Esther to use her position to um, against Haman's plans to eliminate the Jews, in which he's manipulated Xerxes into allowing to happen. The plot gets uncovered. Haman gets killed. Mordecai gets elevated. And a new decree goes out that the Jews can now defend themselves against the destruction that had been planned for them. So those are kind of the high points. I'm going to shift now and finish up talking about the problematic things. And there are some problematic things in this chapter. I know the last couple of chapters, the last few videos, I've kind of talked more about things that make me go, and those are always okay. There's flat out some problematic stuff within this chapter that doesn't sit well with me, and I think it's worth mentioning. First of all, the Edict of Defense that happens to actually allow protection for the Jewish people. Now, this is a good thing. However, the way the narrative talks about it really kind of seems to imply that rather than simply defending themselves, the Jewish people took it upon themselves to strike first, that they're going to fight against their enemies first, against the people who may do them harm first. And there also seems to be some implied vengeance going on rather than just defense. And now I could be misreading that. I will own that. I could be misreading that. But it kind of bugs me that the way that things go down is it seems like there's a lot of destruction of a lot of people. A lot of people get killed. But we do hear that it's against enemies who are conspiring against them. So I may be jumping at shadows there. And again, I'll own that. But it does strike me as slightly problematic. The other thing that's problematic for me in this book, and humongous red flags here, is the status and treatment of women in this book. And I will recognize that this is telling of the culture at the time. That does not excuse it, but that is the reality. But there's a lot of troublesome ways that women are treated. They're at the complete whim of men. Xerxes, after Vashti refuses to come before him to answer the summons, is advised to deal harshly with Vashti. Otherwise, other women will now disrespect their husbands. That's just like, make an example of her, and that's problematic. Esther is valued in the harem and even beforehand simply because of her beauty, and that's problematic. That seems to be an indication that women are only good because of the way they look, and that's a problem if that's the takeaway there. The idea of harems and concubines, period, are problematic. They're only there to please someone, and that's not okay. And even the title of the chapter, honestly, is a little problematic, implying that Esther is valued only because of her beauty, and that all of this happens because of their beauty. Now, the reason that I take issue with these things is because it is not respectful of the personhood of Esther or of Vashti or women in general. It takes away agency. It takes away inherent value in the person rather than simply saying you're only good because you're beautiful, or you're only good because you listen. All of these things are problematic. So while there is hopeful stuff and there is good stuff within the book of Esther, there's also some really problematic stuff. That's everything I have. I'll let you continue with your conversation and your exploration, and we'll be back next time.